Okay, in this video, let's talk about Chinese pinyin and the tones, right? What is pinyin?
Pinyin is the Romanized phonetic system used to transcribe Chinese characters into the Latin alphabet. It helps with pronunciation, especially for learners, by indicating the sounds and tones of Mandarin Chinese.
When
Each,
was it created? You know that? I think it was about 50 years ago. It was created by China. Is that right?
yes, that's correct. Pinyin was officially adopted in China in the 1950s, so it's been around for over 50 years. It was developed to help improve literacy and make learning Mandarin more accessible.
Yeah. However, if you go to China, you don't really see a lot of pinyin. I mean, you would see a lot of pinyin in the dictionaries or textbooks for beginners, and I think since from the third class or fourth class, then there's going to be no pinyin in the textbooks in the primary school. All you have is characters. But if you look into the dictionary, you will find some. Is that right?
Exactly. Exactly. Pinyin is primarily a learning tool. Once students become more familiar with Chinese characters, Pinyin is used less frequently in daily materials. You'll mostly find it in resources for learners and in dictionaries.
So strictly speaking, pinyin is not Chinese, it's just a phonetic system, right? And then in pinyin writing, there are not just Roman letters, but some of the vowels would have little tones on the top of it, like the four of them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Pinyin uses Roman letters along with tone marks to indicate the four tones in Mandarin.
Which
These tone
is,
marks
yeah, the tone marks actually make it really difficult to type, if you think about it. So sometimes when I'm typing, I have to use a number, like, for example, ma, I would have put M, A, and then the number one after that, indicating that is the first tone.
Yes, using numbers is a common way to represent tones in Pinyin when typing, since it's simpler than adding tone marks. It's a practical workaround.
Yeah, although I have to say that when we when I teach my students, we always talk about tones, and one of the common or strange questions would be, why do you have tones in Chinese? Do you happen to know the answer, or what do you reckon?
Tones are fundamental in Chinese because they help distinguish meaning between words that otherwise have the same phonetic pronunciation. Mandarin is rich in homophones, so tones provide an essential layer of meaning.
Yeah,
For
but
example, the
why are
syllable
you rich in homophones? Is that going to be confusing though? If you are using the same pronunciation, only change the tone to mean different things, and sometimes the same pronunciation with the same tone would have quite a few Chinese characters behind it. Isn't that more confusing language? I think comparatively speaking, generally speaking, with other like Roman letter-based languages.
It might seem confusing at first, but context plays a huge role in Chinese, helping listeners distinguish meanings. While it might add complexity, it also allows for a rich and compact language. Many other languages have elements of ambiguity that rely on context too. Over time, it becomes second nature for speakers.
I would have to agree with you on that one. Chinese language, from my own experience, is much more contextual language. Or another word would be poetic, actually. Chinese, in my opinion, I don't know many languages, I know English and Chinese, but in my opinion, the poetry in Chinese is much better. Better is a big word, but I think it's much better than English because one character could mean multiple things and you can play with them. Poetry is all about playing with the words and then giving you a feeling of emotion which cannot be clearly or precisely expressed. So yeah, I think Chinese language is better with poetry. Would you agree?
I would agree with you. Chinese poetry often has a unique depth due to the richness and flexibility of characters. The ability to convey multiple layers of meaning with a single character can make poetry especially evocative and nuanced. It's a powerful aspect of the language.
Okay. What else there is to talk about tones? But then the thing is, when Chinese people are speaking, you don't really hear the tones very well. When we talk about the tones, when we slow down and exaggerate, like and you can hear that clearly. But when I'm speaking like normally, 我的名字是李立超，我的名字是李立超. It would be very difficult to hear that, isn't it?
Yes, in fluent speech, tones can blend together and become less distinct. Context and sentence structure help listeners understand the meaning even when tones aren't pronounced as distinctly as they are in isolation. With practice, native speakers intuitively pick up these subtleties.
Yeah, but then any suggestions for those second language learners on distinguish the tones or learning about the homophones in Chinese or getting used to it? Any tips?
Definitely. Here are a few tips for learning tones and distinguishing homophones. 1. Practice tone pairs. Focus on practicing pairs of tones to get used to how they sound in combination.
Yeah.
2. Listen and
I'm
imitate.
gonna have to interrupt. Yeah, I think you were trying to mean is like the two character words, like for example, 吃饭, right? Instead of practicing 吃饭, you put them together, 吃饭. So you remember that two tones, two syllables as one word, and that might, even though you don't know the tones up and downs, but if you repeat enough times, you might be able to get those vocabulary. What else do you have?
That's exactly it. Another tip is to practice with minimal pairs, like ma, mother, and ma, horse, to highlight the differences. Also, using apps or tools with tone drills can be helpful. Recording yourself and comparing it to native speakers can also improve accuracy. Practice consistently, and over time, distinguishing tones will become more natural.
Okay, the second and third advice is not as good as the first one. Yeah, I mean, they're not bad. Okay, thanks very much for that, and I think that would conclude our conversation. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Talk to you later.